take you back to a couple of days ago, where it almost seemed like that Pochettino is feeling the pressure just a little bit when he was asked about some of his squad selection and some of his players who are perhaps eyeing a bit more playing minutes, and this is what Mauricio Pochettino had to say about that.
Players need to understand that that is not a charity things that we are going to play for shock and play football. No, we need to win. We must win. That is why sometimes we feel so disappointed, the professional, because sometimes the player, difficult to understand the environment of the player also. Is they say, oh, disappointed because didn't play again, and Kunku in that case again, Sheffield United. I am disappointed to have a player that we should be an important player for us is not helping the team. I'm disappointed. If he didn't play, it's not because we don't believe in him. Or people around the player, complain, I wanted to play, I am disappointed, I want to do, come on. I am disappointed. The club is disappointed that is investing big, to perform and to score goals. And when you are not scoring goals, okay, we pay the salary every month. If you not play, if you are injured or when you not perform, yes, come on. Who suffer for us, for the coaches? Who suffer for the club? Who suffer? No, it's always no. Come on.
I think generally everyone's disappointed with the state of Chelsea at the moment, but he has certain points, I think, that most of you will be able to agree on. Look, players have the right to ask and demand for more minutes if they feel that they deserve it. But the bigger question is, does anyone deserve it at this point, Scott?
Well, the problem is when you've got a squad of 156 or what probably feels like it, how do you keep everybody happy? And the problem is as well, on top of that is, if results don't go well, because you've got such a big squad and so many individuals that actually will feel that they could be, and pressure from the outside, and who knows, maybe even from the owners, we've spent this amount of money on this player, why isn't he playing? I don't know if that's going on. But the best teams have that consistency. You kind of know what their best 11. They'll make changes here and there a little bit. But when you've got, and I feel sorry for Graham Potter, I feel sorry for Frank Lampard, and I feel sorry for Mauricio Pochettino, when you've got, say, on a training pitch, an 11v11, then you've got more than 11 sitting on the sidelines. Yeah. How on earth do you get a proper harmonious squad? Because you're always going to get people chipping away. So it's a very difficult thing for Pochettino at the moment. Look, should Chelsea be doing better? Absolutely. But it's tough. I just think it's really, really tough for him trying to get a settled side and trying to get consistency when, you've spent £1 billion and actually Chelsea are just not very good in both boxes. It's as simple as that. And that's where games are won and lost. Yeah,
that's the thing, isn't it? But it's difficult to manage that size of a squad. But could he not turn around and say, look, these are my guys, these 20 people, 15 people are my guys, the rest of you, sit out. The rest of you, find something else to do. Can he not do that?
They're all in the same changing room. If you start, you can hear it there. The journalist that's asked that question, I'm not sure who it was, has clearly had a tip-off that there's a couple of players that aren't happy, and he's goaded Pochettino, and Pochettino's gone for the bait. And he's basically told us there's a couple of players in there that aren't happy. When you get, how many times do you hear it only takes one player? You have to get rid of them. Like Scott says, Chelsea have got hundreds of players. One of them, goes rogue or starts talking to their mate, I'm not happy, and then it's like a domino effect. At the moment, I'm amazed they get any wins, because it's just not how you build a football club.
It's not just players talking. Agents get involved in these things today. There's, the entourage gets involved in these things today. What's that famous saying? Too many cooks spoil the pot, isn't it?
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. It's exactly it. And players are. It's not like even when I played 10 years ago. Players have got no qualms about being somewhere for 6 months and saying, I'm not happy here, I fancy going now. That never used to happen, but that's very much a thing now.
Yeah, and historically, Pochettino has preferred to work with tight squads, small squads. I think he's a manager who likes to be reasonably personal with his players. So, if you've got 24 in your squad, well, you can deal with that. You've got a couple out injured, a couple out suspended. Everybody's involved, pretty much. But with the numbers that he's got at Chelsea, I think he does well to remember all their names, to be honest with you.
Putting yourself in his shoes, how could he have managed that any better?
Could he have managed it any better?
How could he have managed that any better?
Well, it's almost
or do you think
impossible.
this is the best that he can do?
It's almost impossible, to be honest with you, because, I was a relatively quiet player as far as interacting with the manager is concerned. So if I was left out, I would tend to take it on the chin, and I would knuckle down in training and try and get back in. But most players these days, and it seems certainly players at Chelsea Football Club, the minute they're not playing or starting, they're knocking on his door and saying why. And it's very difficult for a manager, because sometimes there isn't a true reason why. It's just actually the manager's gut feeling that, you know, you're not quite what I want at the moment. You're not quite playing how I want. And of course, most players see it very differently. They think they're training well. They think they're playing well. Well, we saw it in Manchester United, didn't we? With Ten Hag and Sancho. Yeah, exactly.
The problem is, if you spend that amount of money on young, mainly foreign potential, who aren't seasoned pros, who aren't leaders, it's very difficult to, I mean, you just mentioned rattled off, and I added a couple more of the Chelsea, and where they were one of the best teams in the world. Who are the leaders at Chelsea right now? Who are the seasoned pros that when things aren't going well within a game, they'll grab each other and say, come on, we're going to do this. And while it was very clever on paper to put players on 8-year contracts so you can spread out the FFP over an 8-year period rather than a 4-year period, and then you can spend more because of that, what it's done is we go back to this bloated squad. And you ask pretty much any manager that's out there, he would not want a squad that size. And people say, oh, go on, you spent $500 million and then $1 billion, and you should be able to deal with that. What a positive problem that is. Well, it's really not.
Yeah.
It's really not, when you've got a lot of egos wanting to play and a lot of pressure from the outside saying, well, why isn't he playing? You know, you look at 11, and OK, there's a few suspended today and there's a few injured as well. But there'll always be someone on the bench where that's the question. Why isn't he playing? Not necessarily, oh, he's in here. Why isn't he playing? So it's very difficult for Pochettino, but he's got to be able to deal with that. Well, it looked like he was a little bit rattled there, though.
Yeah, it's not just him. I mean, Graham Potter had to deal with that. He was the first one who was thrown into the deep end since the takeover. And obviously, things didn't go so well with him. But when you look at the numbers between these two managers, has it actually been a good enough improvement? Because, again, they brought in Potter with this whole idea of wanting to build this project with Chelsea. They sacked him pretty much when it hit crisis mode, brought in Pochettino thinking he's going to do the same thing because he's, quote-unquote, the more elite manager, so to speak, Dave. But has he actually improved this Chelsea side? Has he actually made them better than Graham Potter?
No, I think they've paid £1 billion to stand still, frankly. I'm not seeing any great stat that leaps off the... They score a few more goals, sure, but
conceded more as well.
Yeah,
so,
exactly,
yeah,
and look where they are in the
out.
league. But Potter is a guy that you bring in to put a plan in place for 4 or 5 years, because that's what he's done before, and he's done it very, very well. He was completely the wrong manager for Chelsea. They should never have hired him. It was a ridiculous decision. Pochettino is the same, because he doesn't like big squads. I don't know what the guys think. I'm not sure whether they asked for these players or whether they just got given them. And that's a big thing, because Pochettino isn't a guy, like Scott says, who works with a big squad. It seems like he's just gone, there you go. And don't forget as well, 3 other players they bid for that they didn't get. So it could have been even bigger. Yeah.
Scott, you were shaking your head when you say it's not the players that the manager wanted.
Pochettino, you know, obviously only arrived in the summer, so there's 2 windows there that he didn't have a say in. And then I don't believe he's had a full say in last summer as well. How does he turn this around? It's such a very, very difficult thing to do, because the pressure is, you know, what's happened under Abramovich for 20 years almost shouldn't really have worked, but it did perfectly. World-class senior players with a world-class senior manager. If they fell out the top 4, he'd get sacked. Another world-class senior manager would come in. The owners now have gone a completely different route with what they wanted was a young manager, spend a lot of money on potential on 8-year contracts. And you've got half a dozen players who after 2 years will still not look like Chelsea players. And then you're looking to try and move them on, and they've got 6 years left in their contract. Now, how do you do that?
Yeah.
So while it was very clever, almost genius-like from an accountancy point of view, when it comes to what happens on the pitch, it's thrown Chelsea out of kilt so much. And I just feel passionate about Chelsea.
Yeah.
But I also feel that Chelsea fans need to almost reset their minds, because what has happened of the last 2 decades is now completely out the window, and they're going down a different route. And if you expect what's happened of the last 2 decades, you're going to be disappointed for a very long time.
Well, when you look at their problems, okay, let's take away the accounting issues, let's take away the ownership issue. When you look at the problems on the pitch, you know, let's go back to September. right? There were some positive signs of Pochettino. People are saying, oh, even though Chelsea weren't getting the results, the underlying numbers were good. Some of the underlying numbers weren't that far off from Manchester City, which is always a good comparison. But 2 months on from that, 3 months on from that, that underlying stats have gone out the window. They look like, instead of getting positive results against Spurs, positive results against Manchester City, they've had so many false dawns where you think they go from strength to strength. They went from weakness to weakness. I mean, what's the biggest concern here? Is it the attack and the opportunities that they're wasting?
Well, I think the problem with statistics is, and we talk about expected goals, that the real important statistic is how many goals do you score? How many shots do you concede? Well, actually, it's how many goals do you not concede, and ultimately, how many points do you pick up? And if you have a look at Chelsea in their last 6 games, they've picked up 2 wins and 4 defeats in the Premier League. That's 6 points out of a possible 18. Well, I've got to tell you, you do that across the course of a whole season, and that's relegation fodder. It really is. So where are the problems? Scott mentioned it earlier. In both boxes, that's where you win games in the attacking box, and it's where you don't lose them in the defensive box. And I think Chelsea, generally speaking, have been poor in both those absolutely vital areas. Other people will say that, you win a game, you dominate a game by what you do in midfield. But it's an overall thing. But ultimately, Chelsea's results are substandard.
Do you think it's the chopping and changing? I mean, certainly, like the teams we talked about, you talked about the Man United, you knew what back four you were coming up against, or I did. Chelsea, you knew what midfield you were coming up against back then. We spoke about it earlier in the day. The Chelsea back line is, you never know what to expect. Never. No one's ever got a clue what to expect with the Chelsea
even
back
a team selection in general, because if they could get a really good result with X amount of these 11 players, and you'll have multiple changes for no reason. At least I can't fathom the reason why there were changes from a good performance. And it's not just that defence, midfield, attack. There's constantly changes with no reason whatsoever.
I think as a coach, once you start to try to keep people happy, you're in big trouble. I think as the coach, Pochettino needs to say, this is my starting 11, and pretty much that's what I'm going to play. And if that means I'm going to disappoint 11 to 22 other players because they're not going to be involved very often, you need a base.